I want to say this in a way that you can understand. This is not a test. It's me letting you know in the most simple, enthusiastic way possible, yes. There, I said it. I feel good. I've been practicing. Yes, like this time my safety isn't an illusion. Yes, like you aren't the only one here making all the decisions. Yes, you can touch me, take care of me, do right by me. Yes, I'm good. Thank you for asking. No, we know how to say no. But I'll tell you this. At the dungeon, my sensei corrects my form with touch, slaps my elbow up, pushes my legs apart, tells me to follow the feeling and the form. No, you can't do what my sensei can do. No, that is not a sexual encounter. Don't act like you don't know the difference. Yes, affirmative, green light. What you're doing is not wrong. This is okay. Rape culture, assumptive, overbearing, privileged, obsessed with trying to convince me it has a better relationship to my walls of resistance than the parts of me actually trying to break free to experience a moment of just yes. No is a word that I have used, rinsed, washed, and repeated. I have no change left, no spin cycle. It is what it is, even when it comes back around. No change of clothes will make it better. Change your mind that consent as we know it through the lens of rape culture is no friend of mine or yours. Rape culture never asked me if I was okay. It only barely noticed that I survived. It only asked me if I heard that one song that taught it how to speak to me wrong. Rape culture was the worst date, obsessed with sending my order back to the chef until it came back the way that it liked it. Told me that the naked picture of their genitalia in my DMs was a good neighborhood to live in. Only spoke to me long enough for the alcohol to kick in. Rape culture told me it knew my maybe face meant I needed to be saved. Until this day, no has never been able to look at me the way that yes does. They say that asking feels unnatural, like assault feels more natural. Consent feels unnatural, robotic, not practical, divisive, and confusing. So let me make it smooth for you. Don't come for me unless I send for you. That's called me cashing in on the silence you may become my neighbor. That's called accounting 101. Don't assume that I am safe for you to destroy. I consented to the sensei, remember? I'm just playing. I'm not that dangerous. Or am I? Maybe. I like saying yes. I like saying yes more than I like saying no. Consent is powerful. Not only is it powerful, it's liberating and kind of sexy. At bare minimum, consent is considerate. But I want to talk to you today about consent outside of the context of sex or assault. We've learned a lot about consent during the pandemic. Stay over there. Wear your mask. Don't touch me. Keep your distance and request consent to get closer. Boundaries. It's been so profound. I grew up in a small town in Mississippi well before the days of TikTok. I played a few sports, and I was fairly good. And as a result, I experienced one of the most coveted forms of athletic praise possible, the butt slap. It came from all directions. Students, coaches, I even felt mystery slaps when nobody was around. One day, I got fed up. I said, if you slap my butt, I'm slapping your face. It was a bold move to go against the grain of the culture, but then I added, no, you can't slap my butt, but give me a high five instead. You have options. I'm a consent educator, fitness trainer, performance artist, and a body enthusiast. What does that mean? I'm fascinated about bodies, how they move and experience freedom, how they process harm and threat, and the multitude of ways that bodies experience pleasure. In my work, I like to call this full body process and power. It's paying attention to our bodies, our whole bodies, for information about how we feel and how we exist in the world. For example, I teach a dance fitness class. It's dance hall and Afro beats and an excessive amount of gyrating at any particular point. Okay. The story usually goes, a new person comes to the class, they go to the back of the room, and they make themselves as small as they possibly can. At some point, I invite the whole class to lift up their arms and to move their hips in a circle. And then I take a peek and look at the back of the class, and they're looking at me like, you asking me to do what now? But then it begins, like the arms lift. The hips start gyrating clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise. And in that moment, they consent to movement, and it looks like this. Oh, like they can't believe their hips are doing this. They've assessed risk, reward, curiosity, and bravery, and consented and said yes. And so I, in return, say, hell yes. Yes is so profound that in 2015, California passed the affirmative consent law. This law is known as the Yes Mean Yes law. It's been adopted on college campuses and even military bases. Essentially, this law moves the needle from assuming yes until you heard no means no, to rather assuming no until a yes is explicitly requested and delivered. This law requires a pause, a dialogue, a check-in. It's a cute law, framed by other philosophies such as Fry's, created by Planned Parenthood, that consent is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. But the law also adds sober, all of which are thought to help us embrace our bodily autonomy and combat harm against sexual violence. But what if you've been saying no so long that you don't even know how to say yes? What if the very art of saying yes has never been practiced, and honestly, you don't know what you'll say yes to? What if the yes shifts from one person, one scenario, one particular booty slap to the next? What if it's like a maybe, but if this gets weird, it's a no? Or what if we also recognize that yes is a word that's been used to re-victimize survivors by suggesting they gave consent to their own harm? Let's be honest, all of our sex education sucked. It was taught by overworked gym teachers who lacked any enthusiasm and then punished us for laughing through the discomfort of it all. Thankfully, though, consent does not begin at sex, and nor should it end there. It's deeper than sex. The definition of consent is giving ourselves, and maybe possibly another person or team, permission to experience together. And while we can identify red flags, sometimes consent is kind of scary, especially if you aren't a fortune teller and can predict whether a particular experience will be exhilarating or absolutely devastating. But the motivators that drive us to consent are the same: desire, arousal, pleasure, attraction, love, play, and grief, all rooted in developing a deeper, meaningful connection. The problem with consent isn't just establishing consent. It's recognizing that yes isn't the end of the conversation. I want to keep that same energy to decenter sex and focus on the yes and tell you about another part of my work. I am a BDSM and Kink educator. I teach folks how to engage in consensual dynamics rooted in playful, sometimes painful, sometimes power-riddled, sometimes ego-demolishing, sometimes sensually enlightening, climactic, and transformatively radical types of pleasure. BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, domination, submission, and sadism and masochism. Now, if that's a lot to swallow all at once, then we can just call it kink, which is the overarching umbrella that includes all of those things and any other possibility of intimacy, sex, completely optional. And unlike my high school days, now, sometimes I slap faces and butts if they want it. Here, the yes is centered. Every now and then, part of this, I do frolic in dungeons. Now, dungeon, okay? I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, what is this? Yes, it can look like a dungeon, or it can look like a house, or our bedroom, or any other place that us totally normal people decide to call a dungeon. And here is where we go to play. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we establish consent in the kink community and my lessons I've learned from frolicking in dungeons. 1, negotiation. It's a delicious conversation, more like foreplay than extra work. An extreme example is sometimes I offer a questionnaire, and I just want to see their responses. Sometimes the responses are vivid and elaborate and poetic, and sometimes their responses have nothing on them, and I don't know, and NA, and we have to explore a little bit more. I want to tell you about 3 questions that are part of that questionnaire that may help you move beyond just a yes and get a little bit broader with how you actually establish consent. The first question, what type of play do you enjoy? Play is literally anything that you like, whatever you like, and then you put the word play behind it. It could be feather play, tickle play, candle wax play, impact play, sensory deprivation such as blindfolds or headphones. From there, they have the option to mark yes, no, or maybe. When I look at their responses, I only pay attention to the yeses. And then we ask more clarifying questions. Those yeses help build the scene where the interaction takes place, which brings me to my next question. Describe your ideal scene. What would you like to do together is the question that you could ask. A scene is just a place where pre-planned activities happen. We can discuss lighting, mood, music, attire, smells, energy. The next question is, what do I need to know about your body? This is a very important question. This lets me know what part of your body may be off limits, what parts of your body do you feel shame or power, and also more about maybe medical conditions, differences of mobility, anything that I need to know that'll keep you safe in your body. These are questions that I could ask anyone, but there's also one more question, aftercare. Many dungeons and play spaces will have a dedicated aftercare area equipped with first aid, oils, water, snacks, comfort, like really soft pillows. Aftercare is so important. Have you ever ended an interaction and felt weird, like, what do we do now? Aftercare varies from person to person. I may need you to lay with me for 20 minutes. I may need snacks. I may need you to leave immediately. I may need Skittles, lots of Skittles, and bubbles. Or I just may need to have a conversation about what we just did. Aftercare is so revolutionary because it's emphasized with the same amount of vigor as establishing consent. Aftercare allows our body to get back to balance, without which many things could happen, including experiencing an intense drop of energy, psychological distress, or even obsessively trying to recreate the feeling. Hollywood sees this happen time and time again, where actors take on intense scenes and roles and then resort to sleep aids or suffer from depression, because often aftercare is not emphasized. Which brings me to my last point, kinda. Aftercare is harm reduction. Harm reduction is having ongoing check-ins during scenes. Harm reduction in kink looks like establishing safe words that will stop an interaction or slow it down or shift it. In BDSM and kink, there are a few consent philosophies that we are governed by. Safe, sane, consensual, risk-aware consensual kink, personal responsibility-informed consensual kink, and the last one that me and my colleagues have created at my organization, trauma-informed consensual kink. 70% of people in the United States have experienced some form of trauma in their lives. Trauma affects our ability to experience pleasure and to feel safe. With trauma-informed consensual kink, we take this in consideration and pursue pleasure while also trying to reduce the risk of re-traumatization, which is literally the worst thing that can happen. There's one last thing that I want to share with you. Most dungeons and play spaces are 100% dry. There's no alcohol, no bar. And while I do enjoy the occasional libation, I actually prefer to play sober. I want to remember the whole experience. And maybe it's worth a try if you haven't done so recently. Negotiate, consent, and aftercare completely sober, and maybe you'll find a little bit more about who you are. We can call that sober play. That's full body processing power. I want to encourage each of you to practice being consent conscious. To do that, we create space. In our consent engagements, we want to create safety, center pleasure, have awareness about ourselves and the other people that we're engaging with, effective communication, clear and specific. And lastly, the one part that keeps our human connection thriving, empathy. Because one thing I do know for certain, everybody doesn't want your celebratory butt slap. Thank you so much.